How's it going, Marvel fans? Welcome to today's episode on my channel, Sterling on Cinemas. That's Cinemas with an S. And today I'll be giving you my review on X-Men First Class. This was the old uniform, so this is back in the 60s when the X-Men was established. So before I continue, if you are new to this channel, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, subscribe on my YouTube, click that bell to keep up to date with all things Sterling on Cinemas. All things, and I mean it. And don't forget to leave a comment on the section below, whatever you have to say about whatever movie I'm reviewing, good or bad. But if it's bad, it's okay. You don't have to keep it to yourself. We all have our entitled to our own opinions. And most importantly, watch it from the first second to the last. So in the early 1960s, during the height of the Cold War, a mutant named Charles Xavier, Professor X, meets a fellow mutant named Erik Lehnsherr, Magneto. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, in which Charles grew up with a wealthy family, while Erik was a survivor of the Holocaust and lost his parents in Auschwitz, that's a European country, the two became close friends. As the world teeters on the brink of a nuclear war between America and Russia, Charles and Erik with other mutants join forces to save humanity. However, a situation soon tears the friends apart. Now listen, it is super common for every film franchise to have a prequel series, and most of the time it is usually meant to provide more context behind how everything works. But sometimes it can be used just because you have to follow that whole prequel sequel trope in movies. But X-Men First Class actually feels like a necessary origin story. One of the most necessary comic book origin stories to be adapted to film. Even if it is not as engaging as the original X-Men movie, I'm not gonna lie, or as action-packed as X-Men The Last Stand. First Class works more as an origin story for both Charles Xavier and Erik Lehnsherr than just another introduction to the X-Men, because we already know the X-Men. In fact, this movie focuses on a younger X-Men team. And not much changes with this narrative that has not and will not be seen in the entire X-Men series that we don't already know. Don't even get me started with the lack of chronology that this series has. Like, if there is any franchise that is so hard to piece together the whole timeline and the process, which events come before and after, it's X-Men. And if you don't believe me, just watch X-Men Days of Future Past. Like, you'll notice that since this movie, let's just say First Class, let's just say that X-Men First Class, it takes place in the 60s. And since this prequel trilogy, this X-Men trilogy focusing on a younger X-Men was adjacent to when we were getting a Wolverine prequel trilogy, you kind of see how these two different trilogies take place in two different time periods, in many different time periods. Like, the chronology is all over the place, people. I understand. I still don't get it, even as a diehard X-Men fan. I just don't understand which events come before which. Now, for some, it is obvious, and for others, it is still questionable. But since this is a younger X-Men team that is starting to develop, the story spends most of its runtime trying to help the X-Men be made aware that they live in a world where they are feared and hated, and they have the choice between two different responses. To either embrace who they are with pride and power, or to respond to society through atrocity and extremity. But through it all, the movie is just leading up to when the nuclear war gets attempted between America and Russia, and in the heat of the moment, the tides take over and mutants choose a path. Charles Xavier and Erik Lehnsherr go way back, but not like how we thought they would. It is very clear that they have different ideologies and different backgrounds, as seen in the opening moments of First Class and orally in the original X-Men movie. To reiterate, for those of you who may have forgotten, Charles Xavier and Erik Lehnsherr are both mutants, but they are polar opposites as far as how they choose to approach the demand for equal treatment between mankind and the mutant people. Professor X is the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. type that encourages his fellow brothers and sisters to be the bigger person towards those who express hate instead of harmony. Because, like Dr. King said, Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Magneto is essentially the Malcolm X figure with his taste for revenge and lust for extremity in order to bring order to the mutant population. Or as Malcolm X says, by any means necessary, my fellow brothers. And that is what Magneto calls his team of rogue mutants, the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood, the rogue band of bad mutants. Or the tagline of the first X-Men movie says, trust a few, fear the rest. Trust the X-Men, fear the Brotherhood. Now, in some ways, they operate as co-leaders for this X-Men team, with Xavier taking more charge here. I know that the mutant roster will continue to grow in the X-Men franchise. I'm going to probably keep saying that for the rest of this section, for the rest of this series in the Marvel Mondays, where I mention character rosters and the number of different mutants we see pop up in this franchise. But this team only has two other mutants from the original trilogy, which are Mystique and Beast, Hank McCoy. Mystique's relationship with Charles allows us to go in depth with her character, as well in whose ideology she is more intact with. Her relationship with Hank McCoy is something that gets a focus in this and probably the next movies in this trilogy, and was said to be just as vital as Xavier's friendship with Erik. The OG movie mutants we learn about here are Darwin, which is like based off of the evolution, like Darwin evolution. This is a mutant that can evolve and transform into some type of genetic creature, many different genetic appearances. Alex Summers, the brother of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, his name is Havoc. Lasers shoot out of his chest and out of his hands. Another mutant named Angel, not Warren Worthington, but a female named Angel for some reason. And then there's Banshee. Now, the Hellfire Club, led by Kevin Bacon's Sebastian Shaw, consists of Emma Frost, who would go on to be a member of the X-Men in the comics later. Azazel, who is the father of Nightcrawler, who looks like Hellboy if Hellboy had the power to teleport just like Nightcrawler. And then later, of course, Magneto. The character arcs of the two leads makes the story feel more personal and smaller in scale than most X-Men films. And to be honest, I kind of have an issue with that. Now, while the character arcs of both Charles Xavier and Erik Lehnsherr help these characters out to grow, it doesn't really offer much or contribute much to the story. Rotten Tomatoes gives X-Men First Class an 86% score. X-Men First Class gave us the origin story that we needed to see, while offering some decent action, small world building through a period piece that is sure to be carried in the next movies in this X-Men series. Or in other words, this movie in the X-Men prequel trilogy is in the 60s, X-Men Apocalypse is in the 80s, Dark Phoenix is in the 90s, and Days of Future Past is all over different points of time. It has great dialogue and good writing. Even still, most of the narrative tells us what is already expected from these movies, instead of touching on something unfamiliar in this franchise. So X-Men First Class deserves a little bit under X-Men Origins Wolverine, 7.6 SOs out of 10, a C+. So that is my review on X-Men First Class. Y'all can tell me what y'all personally think of this X-Men adventure in the comments below, and I'll see you mutants later. Peace out.